In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on January 27th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Purdue versus Indiana. The scene is Simon Scout Assembly Hall. The energy is loud before the ball even goes up, and Purdue walks in as that slightly uncomfortable road favorite that makes bettors sit up a little straighter. You know the script. One side has been the steadier, more polished version over the long haul, and the other has been streaky, emotional, and at home in one of the most unforgiving gyms in college basketball. It is that classic tension between resume and environment. On paper, Purdue looks like the grown-up in the matchup, with the kind of season that shows up in rankings, efficiency charts, and every conversation about teams that can actually string wins together in March. They lean into a half-court style that feels methodical rather than slow, patient rather than passive, and they tend to treat every possession like it matters, which is pretty handy when you are trying to keep a crowd out of the game. Their guard play has that calm, almost boring quality you secretly want when money is on the line, the kind of decision-making that cuts down on live ball mistakes and does not feed fast breaks the other way. Indiana, on the other hand, feels more like a mood. At home, the crowd gives them an extra gear, and you can almost feel those swings coming. A quick 8-point run here, a barrage of noise there. They can look dangerous when the shots fall and the pace tilts their way, then go quiet for stretches that make fans pull at their hair. That volatility is fun if you are just watching, but it can be a little terrifying if you are trying to predict which version shows up across a full 40 minutes. The rivalry adds a layer that is hard to quantify. Recent history leans toward Purdue in the big picture, yet Indiana still treats that home floor like a shield, and both fan bases expect emotional stretches where logic goes out the window for a few possessions. Those old results stick in your mind, the nights where Purdue handled their business like the superior group and the nights where Indiana simply rode the building's chaos to something bigger than the box score. Honestly, that is part of the fun here. You are not just handicapping 2 rosters. You are wrestling with momentum, memory, and the comfort level of a road favorite that knows it is walking into a storm. What really nudges things in one direction is how these profiles behave when games get close late. The steadier, more structured side usually has the clearer plan in the final 4 minutes, the go-to actions that do not depend on miracle shot making or wild whistles. The more volatile side often needs things to go a certain way. They need the whistle, the threes, the crowd, the emotion to stack just right. With a spread that lives in that 1 or 2 possession window, the question becomes simple. Do you trust the team that has shown it can execute the same blueprint over and over, or the team that needs the night to tilt in its favor in several different ways? That is why, when all the noise settles and you think like someone holding a ticket instead of a foam finger, the more consistent, veteran-driven group feels like the side that is more likely to stretch a 1-possession game into that 2 or 3 basket gap by the final horn. As our first pick for this matchup, the Purdue Boilermakers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The total number sitting out there in the low 150s range paints a story of a fairly high-scoring game, with both teams living somewhere in the mid-70s if things land near expectation. That fits the public image. People hear these 2 names, think about the brand of offense they have seen in highlight clips, and their brains jump straight to trading buckets for most of the night. The full season box scores help that narrative, since both teams have shown they can put up points and are not afraid to shoot early when games open up. But there is a catch. Those averages are flavored by non-conference nights where one side was clearly better and the pace picked up, where late garbage time points made totals look a little louder than the competitive parts of the game. Conference play is a different animal, especially in a league where coaches know each other's sets almost by heart and where officiating and scouting tend to squeeze some of the air out of the tempo. Rivalry games add tension, and tension usually slows people down. Possessions feel heavier, coaches hold the reins a little tighter, and players think a half-second longer about each shot. Even when both teams can score, nerves and familiarity pull things toward a more half-court style, especially later in the game when every empty trip feels like a wasted chance. You see fewer free runs in transition, fewer careless gambles, and more possessions that end with someone trying to manufacture a decent look late in the clock. There is also the tendency for defenses to sharpen after giving up big scoring nights earlier in the schedule. When a team has recently been burned from the perimeter or beaten in a track meet, the next serious test often comes with a clearer focus on contesting shooters, controlling the glass, and taking away those easy rhythm looks. On the flip side, the opponent that just had a feel-good offensive showing will sometimes pull back just a bit, valuing shot quality over sheer volume, especially when they know this time the opponent is prepared and locked in. Historical meetings between these two have not always turned into fireworks either. Some have certainly run hot and soared past similar numbers, but plenty have stalled in that middle ground where both teams score, yet neither explodes. You get those games where the final totals are respectable, but not wild, something in that range where you remember the intensity more than the scoring run. That is exactly the kind of pattern that makes a slightly high total feel a bit ambitious. So when you picture this particular night, with both sides aware of the stakes, the scouting, and the emotional weight of every trip, it is easier to imagine a game that breathes but never really turns into a sprint, more controlled than chaotic, with long stretches where defenses win just enough possessions to keep the scoreboard from racing ahead of that posted number. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Kentucky versus Vanderbilt. We are in Nashville, in that odd but charming spaceship of a building they call Memorial Gym, where the court is raised and the benches sit on the baselines, and visiting teams sometimes look like they are shooting from a parking lot instead of a basketball court. Kentucky comes in riding a 5-game heater in league play, sitting at 14-6 overall and 5-2 in the conference. And that sounds impressive until you notice the books are still making Vanderbilt the clear home favorite, roughly in that 6 to 7 point range depending on where you look. That tells you a lot already. This is one of those perception games, the big name in Kentucky blue on one side and the supposedly quieter Vanderbilt program on the other, even though the Commodores are sitting around a 17-3 type of season and flirting with the top 15 in the country. They have turned Memorial into a track meet most nights, playing at a pace that lives in the national top tier, pairing it with a top-shelf offense that comfortably hangs around 90 points on people with a double-digit average margin. And that is not really a fluke anymore, it is the identity. What makes Vanderbilt such a headache is how they play, not just who they have. They move the ball, they cut, they turn possessions into collaborative projects instead of solo missions, landing in that neighborhood of top 20 in assists and flirting with top 5 nationally in assist-to-turnover ratio. That is a fancy way of saying they share it and they do not throw it away. In that quirky gym, where the sight lines feel foreign if you are not used to them, that kind of rhythm offense becomes even more annoying because it is hard enough to guard shooters when you are comfortable and a lot harder when you feel like your depth perception is off by half a step. Kentucky, on the other hand, has had to patch things together. Their offense still grades out as efficient, scoring north of 82 points per game with a margin that would make most coaches happy, but the way they get there has changed. They have lost their starting point guard Jalen Lowe for the season to shoulder surgery, forward Cam Williams to a broken foot that needed surgery, and rim protector Jaden Quaintance is dealing with persistent knee swelling. All three are out again for this matchup, so the Wildcats are leaning heavily on Otega-Owe to create late in the clock, while a short list of ball handlers does the heavy lifting just to get them into sets. That kind of setup can look gritty and tough, and sometimes it is, but it also leaves them one twist away from a scoring drought when fatigue hits late. Vanderbilt is not perfectly healthy either, which is part of the story. Starting point guard Frankie Collins is still sidelined after December meniscus surgery, and senior guard Duke Miles is officially listed as questionable, even though he suited up and looked explosive in that 88-56 bounce-back win at Mississippi State a couple of days ago. There is a reasonable, clearly labeled speculative angle here. If Miles were to get downgraded closer to tip, you would expect more weight to fall on Tyler Tanner, Tyler Nickel, and the front court to help with creation, but there has been no public signal that he is set to sit. Even with those caveats, Vanderbilt's profile is loud and clear. They play fast, they share, they defend in a way that squeezes extra possessions out of every game, and they push opponents into one of the worst assist-to-turnover profiles in the country. Kentucky's counter relies on more old-school ingredients. They want to win with half-court toughness, stringing together stops, controlling the glass, and living at the foul line. We saw that against Ole Miss, where they survived despite shooting only 36% from the field because they kept grinding, trusted Owe to close, and piled up trips to the stripe. That is a formula that looks heroic at home, when the whistles are friendlier and you can get to 30-plus free throws, but it gets a lot more fragile in someone else's gym, especially against a top offense that loves to run and knows your ball handling is taped together. There is another layer here that casual bettors feel even if they do not name it. The analytics community has been circling this kind of spot all week, talking about Vanderbilt winning by multiple possessions, and the market has nudged the number out toward almost 3 possessions in some places. When fast-paced, efficient home teams get a short-handed visitor that has to scrape for every clean look, the pressure quietly shifts. Kentucky has to keep scoring and taking care of the ball for all 40 minutes against a defense that thrives on live ball steals and broken possessions. That is asking a lot from a thin rotation on the road. Put together the tempo edge, the depth advantage, the specific backcourt matchup, and that nasty, unique home court environment in Nashville, and it is pretty natural to lean toward the black and gold extending things late rather than expecting a heroic, short-handed road cover from Kentucky. As our first pick for this matchup, the Vanderbilt Commodores to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. You look at this match and see a projected total sitting in the high 150s, and the first reaction is probably something like, these teams score in bunches, how does this not soar past that number? Honestly, that is exactly the emotional hook those big numbers play on. On paper, you have one side that has been around 90 points a night and another over 80, and the natural instinct is to picture a track meet where nobody misses for long. Let me explain why the story underneath that surface picture is a bit more complicated. Once league play hits, scoring numbers often get sanded down, and that has happened here too. Vanderbilt's point totals in conference games have dipped into the low 80s, while opponents are closer to 80 than the mid-70s they saw in non-conference action. That does not sound dramatic, but it hints at more possessions ending in long, empty trips, more scouting, and more familiarity. Defenses know the play calls, coaches have already stolen each other's favorite sets on film, and you start to see more grind and less parade. Kentucky's current identity also leans away from pure chaos. Even though their offensive efficiency numbers still look solid, the way they create scoring has more to do with physicality, rebounding, and frequent whistles than with constant pace. That game against Ole Miss was a good example. They survived a rough shooting night because they earned 38 free throw attempts. From a totals perspective, that kind of game can be sneaky. Free throws add points, but they also bleed clock, especially when you get extended sequences of fouls, replays, and inbound resets. There is another subtle factor that shows up historically between these two programs. Recent meetings have leaned heavily toward lower outcomes compared with lofty expectations, with the total staying under 160.5 in the vast majority of clashes, and especially so in games played in this building. That is not magic, it is rhythm. These teams see each other's schemes often, both staffs know where the preferred shots come from, and possessions tend to slow down a little when every cut has already been tagged on video 10 times. Even Vanderbilt's own pattern lately, as the schedule has toughened, has tilted more toward restraint than fireworks. The early season blowouts against overmatched non-conference opponents inflate average scores, but once January hits and legs get heavier and scouting reports get thicker, even fast teams have more nights where they sit in the low 80s rather than the high 90s. Kentucky's thin rotation also quietly pulls toward a slightly slower game, because asking a short bench to run flat out for all 40 minutes is a recipe for late-game mistakes. There is a clearly speculative but reasonable game script question that matters for the total. If one side manages to build a big lead early, the leading coach often instructs his guys to manage the clock, use more of the shot clock, and avoid unnecessary risk, and that kind of game management naturally cools the scoring pace late. If the game stays tight, you do have to factor in the chance of a whistle-heavy final few minutes with intentional fouls and extended trips to the line. Even then, you are asking a short-handed offense to keep pace at a high level for the full 40 minutes to push things into that 160s range. So when you pull it all together, you have season-long numbers that make the total look high-scoring, conference trends that shave some shine off those averages, a history of this matchup landing below that inflated zone, and current rotations that subtly favor slightly slower stretches, more half-court possessions, and more clock used. All of that nudges this matchup toward a result that sits a bit under the number rather than needing everything to break perfectly for points to keep flying non-stop. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. One last thing, lines move, injury reports change, and that can shift the whole puzzle on game day. So check your sportsbook, refresh the latest news before you bet, and treat this as analysis, not a promise. Bet carefully, manage your bankroll like you actually want to keep betting next week, and enjoy what should be a really entertaining night in Nashville. Creighton versus Marquette. Pfizer Forum is going to be loud, bright, and a little edgy, the kind of Big East gym where you almost feel the student section in your chest before the ball even goes up. Underneath all that noise, though, this matchup really comes down to something pretty simple. One team has struggled badly in the underdog role, and the other is very comfortable living as the favorite. Creighton comes in sitting at 12-8 overall and 6-3 in Big East play, while Marquette is sitting at 7-14, 2-8 in the league, with every single one of those 7 wins coming at home. That is classic home cooking territory, the kind of profile where the building is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. They already saw each other once too, that December game in Omaha that turned into an 84-63 beatdown, where Marquette shot just 34.4% from the floor and looked like they had stumbled into someone else's practice run. Since that meeting, Creighton has pretty much leaned into a great offense, chaotic defense, identity, and honestly, it is still working well enough to stack wins. They just dropped 94 on Xavier, got 40 points from the bench, and finished it on a walk-off putback from Austin Swartz, and that was on a night when Jason Green had to exit early with a shoulder issue. It felt like one of those games where, even with something going wrong, their scoring depth just kept answering. From a roster angle, the Blue Jays are still without sophomore forward Jackson McAndrew for the full season after that confirmed foot injury back in November, and big man Josh Townley Thomas is only easing back from surgery and non-contact work, so you really cannot pencil either of them into a meaningful role for this one. And they are names you keep in the back of your head for context, not guys you build tonight's rotation around. Owen Freeman has been tagged as questionable recently because of illness, and that status is genuinely up in the air, so it should not be treated like a sure thing either way. Even so, this group has leaned hard into skill, spacing, and shot making, and you can see it in how they spread the floor and keep pressure on defenses without needing everything to funnel through the same player. It is that modern shooters everywhere vibe that looks even more dangerous when the other side is wobbling. Marquette, on the other hand, has quietly been gutted. Guard Zaid Lowry still shows up if you scroll season stat tables, but he officially left the program in late December, so any graphic that lists him as a current key piece is flat out outdated. He will not be involved in this game. Guard Sean Jones has missed 7 straight with that foot issue and was still listed as out on the last availability report before the Butler matchup. So unless there is a genuine surprise, you have to treat this like he is not part of the backcourt picture tonight. That is a lot of pressure on the remaining guards to handle creation, ball pressure, and scoring all at once. What is left for Marquette is a team shooting about 42.2% from the field and 30.3% from 3, which sits at the bottom of the Big East right now, trying to keep pace with a Creighton offense that ranks top 45 nationally in 2-point percentage at roughly 57% and sits at the top of the league there while also knocking down more than 10 threes per game. At the same time, Marquette is near the bottom of the country in defending the three-point line and sits around 217th nationally in 2-point defense. That combination is kind of like trying to fix a leaky roof with paper towels. You are facing a team that wants to shoot, and your weak spots live exactly where they want to attack. Now, Creighton's own defense is messy, and their staff has basically admitted it, talking about how they cannot stop anybody, and their adjusted defensive efficiency has slid out of the top 50. But when you stack that next to Marquette sitting at 0-10 straight up as an underdog this season and 3-7 against the spread when catching at least 1.5 points, while Creighton is 9-2 straight up as a favorite and has already handled this program comfortably across the last 2 seasons, the price the market is asking feels more like a nudge than a trap. You are essentially being asked whether you trust the better half-court offense, the more stable late-game shot creation, and the side that already solved this specific opponent once to get you across a one-possession type number. With all that context, and with the honest reminder that Freeman's status and any last-second injury tweak should be checked again before you actually put money down, this shapes up as the sort of matchup where backing the more reliable offensive engine feels like the logical play, even if the defense makes you nervous at times. As our first pick for this matchup, the Creighton Blue Jays to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Now let us shift to the total, because this number in the mid-150s is basically the books asking you one very specific question. Do you really believe these two defenses are suddenly going to fix themselves on a random Tuesday night? It is a fair question too. On paper, the projection models are sitting right on that fence, with one respected efficiency site spitting out something like 78 to 75, and another implied line sitting around 78 to 77, which is how you end up staring at a total of 155.5 that feels like it is challenging you. But if you look at what is happening in their games right now instead of just staring at spreadsheets, you get a pretty different emotional read. Creighton is averaging 79 scored and 74.4 allowed, and over the last 4, they have been giving up close to 90 a night while still flashing that offense that just hung 94 on Xavier. Their coach has talked about the rim protection not being there, and the numbers back it up. They sit at the bottom of the league in block rate and near the bottom in forcing turnovers. That mix, strong shooting, very little shot blocking, and soft ball pressure, is basically an invitation for both teams to feel comfortable on offense. That kind of formula tends to turn games into track meets, not rock fights. Possessions stay relatively clean, guys get into rhythm, and suddenly that high total does not look so high in the second half when both sides are already in the 70s. If you have watched enough college hoops, you know that feel, where every empty trip starts to feel unusual rather than normal. Marquette has turned into the Big East's make-every-game-weird team on the defensive side. They have allowed more than 1.2 points per possession in each of their last 5 outings. They struggle to protect the paint, and they sit 9th in the league in two-point defense. At the same time, their offense has perked up in 4 of their last 5, and those games sit among their 8 best scoring performances of the season by points per possession. So you get this strange mix. The season-long shooting numbers look ugly, but the recent film and numbers say this is a group that is actually starting to see the ball go in more often. Season-wide, those Golden Eagles percentages still drag down their overall profile, and honestly, that is a big reason why this total is still playable for people who follow form trends. Odds makers have to price the entire body of work, all the bricks from November and December, while we can lean into the recent reality of a defense that gives up straight-line drives like it is handing out samples and an offense that finally stopped clanking every open look. There is a little contradiction there. The full season math says be careful, while the recent eye test says this might turn into a shootout, and that tension is exactly where betting numbers live. Add in the fact that 9 Creighton games and 8 Marquette games have already gone past this 155.5 number, and their basic scoring averages add up to around 155 on their own, and you start to see why this total feels more like a ceiling that can be reached than a mountain that cannot. Both staffs, based on how their teams are actually playing, seem more focused on whether they can score enough to keep pace than on grinding possessions down to nothing. And just so we keep it honest, any predicted score is still only a projection, not a promise, and one cold shooting night can absolutely blow up a ticket, either way. Given the current total, the way Creighton's spacing and attacks in the paint mesh with Marquette's interior issues, and the recent pattern of both teams living in higher possession, higher efficiency chaos, this profiles as the sort of game that wants to be played in the open floor, with points flowing more than they stall. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. New Mexico versus UNLV. New Mexico walks into Las Vegas like the grown-up in the room, while UNLV is that unpredictable cousin who can either steal the show or spill the drink on the carpet. The Lobos are sitting at 16-4 overall and 7-2 in league play, and they have been stacking wins in a way that feels steady rather than fluky, stringing together streaks where they handle business by comfortable margins instead of sweating every possession. They are putting up close to 80 points a night and holding teams in the upper 60s, so the identity is pretty clear, a group that can score but does not need to win a track meet to feel at home. On the other side, UNLV comes in at 10-9 and 5-3 in conference, and their vibes are very different. They score plenty, somewhere in the high 70s, but they give almost all of it back, which makes them fun to watch if you are neutral and a bit nerve-wracking if you have any stake in the outcome. It is like watching someone drive a fast car with one hand on the wheel. You know they can fly, but you are never quite sure if they will hug the curve or end up in the gravel. Now the line asking New Mexico to cover around 5.5 points on the road at the Thomas and Mack Center is where the story really gets interesting. That gym can fill up with close to 18,000 people, and history in that building has not exactly been a warm hug for the Lobos. Over the last stretch of meetings, New Mexico has struggled there, dropping most of those games straight up and cashing very few tickets against the spread, while UNLV has generally looked more comfortable on its own floor. So if you only stare at the long-term records in that arena, you can talk yourself into the idea that the home side is getting disrespected. But that is where you have to pull yourself back to this particular season and this particular version of these rosters. New Mexico's current core feels built for grown man basketball, with a freshman guard who carries himself like he has been in this league for years and a young big who treats the glass like it belongs to him and everyone else is renting space. Around them you get a rotation that keeps coming in waves, where the next guy off the bench still defends, still rebounds, still pushes the pace, even while backcourt pieces like Chris Howell are dealing with injury issues and others like Kevin Patton Jr. and Sir Marius Jones are essentially put on the shelf for the year. The production has not fallen off a cliff with those losses, which tells you a lot about the structure of this team. UNLV, meanwhile, feels more like a project in progress. New coaching, heavy roster turnover, and then the frustration of seeing rotation pieces like Ladji Dembele and Miles Chase stuck on the sideline with injuries. That all adds up to a team that is still figuring out which combinations it can trust for long stretches. They have size in the middle and they have creators on the ball, but the rotation can thin out faster than you would like when foul trouble or fatigue kicks in. You could see it in their recent home loss where they let a visiting power conference level opponent live at the free throw line and never quite fix the leak. Honestly, that foul tendency might be the quiet hinge on this matchup. New Mexico wants to pressure the rim, live in the paint, and turn stops into easy offense the other way. UNLV's defense can be aggressive, but that aggression sometimes turns into reach-ins, late bumps, and long stretches of defending with players on the floor already carrying 2 or 3 fouls. Over 40 minutes, that kind of pattern favors the team that is deeper, more connected defensively, and less dependent on 1 or 2 players going supernova just to stay within shouting distance. So while the building history leans one way, the current form, depth, and two-way stability lean the other, and that is where the spread starts to feel more like a test of whether you trust the stronger overall profile rather than a test of your appetite for chaos. As our first pick for this matchup, the New Mexico Lobos to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Now let us shift to the total, because that number sitting around 157.5 points is not shy at all. New Mexico plays at a pace that is just a shade on the fast side, with roughly 70-plus possessions in a typical game, which is fast enough to keep things lively but not so fast that it feels out of control. They are very comfortable getting to the rim, scoring inside the arc, and using their defense to create live ball turnovers that become layups or early offense opportunities. Instead of grinding through half-court sets every trip, they like to get downhill when the chance appears, which naturally pushes the score upward over time. UNLV, on the other hand, lives in that beautiful mess where shot selection is a little adventurous and the tempo can jump a notch as soon as they see a miss they can run off. Their lead guard attacks, and the Rebels are happy to push the ball up the floor and force the issue rather than walk it up and call something calm. They also have a knack for getting to the free throw line, or for sending opponents there, which is its own little scoring engine. The clock stops, the scoreboard keeps moving. We just saw them play a home game where the visitors spent a lot of time at the stripe and the final score still climbed into the 150s, which fits the personality of how they play. If you look at recent patterns, both teams have been trending toward higher totals. New Mexico has been involved in a string of games where the final number has landed above the posted total, which makes sense when you combine their scoring punch with a pace that does not crawl. UNLV has seen several of its contests at home clear the number as well, helped by the fact that they score in the high 70s and also allow opponents to feel pretty good on offense. It is a little repetitive to say it, but those kinds of games start to stack up and you stop calling them accidents. Here is the thing that ties it all together. The specific matchup details lean toward more points, not fewer. New Mexico's style is to attack the basket and punish sloppy transition defense, and UNLV has had real issues staying locked in on the perimeter and keeping drivers from getting all the way into the lane, especially when they have to defend for a full clock. On their side of the ball, the Rebels are not shy about embracing variance. Their easiest path to boosting the score is to keep the pace up, let their primary creator hunt for mismatches, and trust that their shot makers can string together enough makes from all over the floor. That brand of basketball, from both teams, tends to create swings, scoring runs, and a lot of possessions where the defense is backpedaling. Once you factor in late-game fouling, you get the picture of a contest that is more likely to lean toward fireworks than toward a low-scoring rock fight. A number in the high 150s is not casual. You need steady scoring across both halves, not just one explosive run, but this pairing of tempo, offensive freedom, defensive volatility, and whistle-friendly stretches nudges the expectation toward a total that lands on the higher side. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed. Subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.